Just before I start, can I say this morning that this week has been quite difficult. A lot of us have got church ready for opening when we can open for private prayer and beyond. But I suppose, if I'm honest, the bureaucracy that is the Church of England in Wigan at the moment is stopping us from doing that. But there's a lot of people that are working really hard to get things done. So we'll let you know as soon as we possibly can do when church will be open. We'll put signs outside and get people to ring round. It will be open for private prayer. Also this Sunday, Heather Peach should have been ordained deacon. There is a ceremony, but she's going to be made a lay minister in the church. She will be ordained deacon later on in September. Just think of her, will you? And the other, I think there are 24 people, 25 with Heather, who will be ordained this year. So just think of them if you can do, especially Heather on Sunday. Thanks. A few years ago, Roberta and I visited New York City. This is a city that people who had visited told me that I would really enjoy, and how right they were. It's not exactly what I imagined. For one thing, it's much smaller than I thought it would be. The island of Manhattan is barely 7 miles long, and at its widest point, just 2 miles. So it's all very walkable. This is a melting pot of a city. People of all ethnic backgrounds rubbing shoulders with one another. Residents and visitors making their way through a forest of towering concrete, steel and glass buildings, which on some days literally disappear into the clouds. Well, we did all the usual things. We walked through Central Park on Saturday, took a boat trip around Manhattan Island, went to Times Square where we queued for theatre tickets and watched the whole world go by. We got caught in a thunderstorm, took the lift to the top of the Empire State Building at night, saw the ice rink at the bottom of the Rockefeller Center, visited Central Station, and we walked the High Line, which is the old elevated railway line, which has been raised into a pedestrian walkway filled with plants and trees that weaves its way through the city. We walked up Fifth Avenue and had a look in Tiffany's, and spent a really, really compelling few hours looking through the designer clothes department in Macy's. We did and saw much more. However, I had to wait until Sunday to visit the place I really wanted to go to more than any other in New York. On that sunny Sunday morning, we took the metro down to the Battery, the tip of Manhattan Island, and took a ferry out to Liberty Island, where stands the Statue of Liberty, holding up the flame of freedom high above her head, as she gazes out to all who enter her city from the sea. We then went on to Ellis Island, the place where all immigrants came through for nearly 100 years, as they sought out a new life in America. Once back at the Battery, we walked uptown on Broadway and Wall Street to Fulton Street, where stood the place, or stands the place, that I so wanted to visit, St. Paul's, the only remaining colonial-style church left standing in Manhattan. St. Paul's has been used continually for worship since 1766 and was used by George Washington as the place of worship when he was inaugurated as the first president of the United States of America. And St. Paul's remains largely unchanged from that time. As you approach St. Paul's, you find a church which has been hemmed in by much taller buildings for many years. It resembles St. Martin's in the Fields and is set in a churchyard, the graves of which date back to the colonial and revolutionary days. As you walk through the front door, you find a bright white interior. The altar faces you, and there is a balcony which runs down its colonnaded sides. 2 doors on each side of the altar lead you out of the church into the garden with its old gravestones. And as you look up, you find that you and St. Paul's are completely dwarfed by the New World Trade buildings. On 11th of September 2001, the twin towers of the old Trade Centre collapsed after that appalling terrorist attack. They lay just across the street, and as they fell, they destroyed everything around them, except St. Paul's. A large tree at the back of the churchyard was toppled. It spread itself over the graves and somehow protected them. Not one grave was disturbed, and neither was the church damaged. The church and the churchyard were covered in debris and dust, but there was no damage to the actual building. Because of its proximity to Ground Zero, St. Paul's, from almost the first moments of that disaster, became the site of round-the-clock relief ministry to workers assisting in the rescue and recovery efforts. From September 2001 until May 2002, St. Paul's opened its doors to firefighters, construction workers, police officers, and anyone else who needed respite or refuge. It provided meals, beds, counselling and prayer. Medical personnel, doctors and nurses, massage therapists, chiropractors and musicians transformed the church into a place of peace, rest, reconciliation and hope. Representing that hope is a large bell in the churchyard, given and forged by the City of London, which is rung every 11th of September. Inside St. Paul's, there are still to be found the cards and letters, drawings and flags, badges and banners, photographs and mementos, sent and brought to recovery workers working in the church, and they are a really moving and humbling testament to the human spirit. They silence you, and a lump grows in your throat as you begin to realise something of the enormity of that dreadful act of human barbarism that occurred on that day. Here you see in this place the very worst of humankind. Here you see the very best of humankind, and it is the best that triumphs. St. Paul opened wide its doors at that time, as it always had, to all people of all races, and to people of all faiths, and to people of no faith. Its doors were opened 24 hours a day, and all who walked through them found shelter and peace from the horror which lay outside its walls. St. Paul's was there, and because it was there, it opened its doors and its heart to the weary, the lonely, the injured and the damaged. It stood and opened wide its arms to anyone in need. There must have been and will have been other places that could and perhaps did some of the same, for all I know. However, it was the church, St. Paul's, which filled a need and stepped up to the mark. When I say this, I mean not only the building, but the church in its wider sense. I mean the people of the church who were willing to open their hearts, minds and arms to those who needed to feel loved. Reverend James Cooper of St. Paul's wrote, "We love neighbour near and far. God has asked for partnership, calling us to work but not sending us out alone. The call is to work together. We do so knowing that society is transformed when the church's presence is felt in deep and lasting ways." Here is a story of just what, in my opinion, the church should be: open and and honest, a place, an institution which works at breaking down the barriers which separate people from God, a place that welcomes and sends out, a place that loves its neighbours, a good Samaritan in troubled times, a place that is filled with the love and the grace of Jesus Christ. Our churches have done all this over the last 3 months in many different inventive and creative ways, whether it be on television, the radio, on the internet, on the phone, or by distributing food into the community. All this and more. But I believe that it is now time, where it is possible to do so, to get our church doors open again. The doors which more often than not stand at the very heart of communities. The next few months, and indeed the coming years, are going to be a time when the church, like all other institutions, will have to take stock and reimagine themselves. Nothing will be as it ever was before. In my opinion, and it is only my opinion, the church should be constantly changing, constantly challenging, always shifting, and yet at its very heart and core, unchanging. We need to be ready to welcome in and also to walk out into our changed world, and with truth and honesty to meet the challenges that we will all face, and always remembering that we as church are called first and foremost to serve God and love his people. Being church is that simple. Love God and love his people. It's that simple. St. Paul wrote these words in his letter to the Hebrews. And let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, but let us encourage